Hands up here if you've ever bribed a child to do something. Almost everybody. Yeah, I have a 4-year-old, and I essentially bribe him every day to do stuff. So I'm going to share with you a piece of research that has to do with children and their performance, and specifically their helpfulness. Okay? So in this piece of research, in the corner of a room is a researcher behind a table, shuffling around some papers, and in the middle of the room is a toddler, about 2 or 3 years old, and the toddler is playing with an amazing toy. So lights and noises, this incredible toy, really great for the toddler. And every once in a while, the researcher will drop some paper or some object off the table, and the experiment asks, will the toddler leave their amazing toy and go and help the researcher? Okay? So hands up if you think that less than 50% of the time, the toddler leaves their toy and helps. Less than 50%. Okay, we've got a pocket of child haters over here. I can see them. Hands up over 50%. Okay, so quite an optimistic group. So here is what happens.
Falten. Gut raus. Und rein. Falten. Und raus.
Drops the object.
So. Sit drauf. Und rein.
Adorable. And it turns out that over 90% of the time in this experiment, the toddler actually leaves their toy and goes and helps the research assistant. Now, I have tried this at home, and my kid is in the 8% that didn't add up, and I've done it time and time again to my great disappointment. This experiment, of course, is not just about that. It's about whether or not we can improve the performance, in this case, the helpfulness of the toddler. And there were 3 conditions. There's the control condition, where they just keep doing it again and again and again for a day, and they see how that affects their performance. There's the praise condition, where every time the toddler does it, they're given a little, well done, nice one, and they see how that affects their performance. And then there's an electric shock condition. Joking, it's a gag, it's my best, no confetti. Okay, there's a reward condition, where they're given a little treat. Oh, well done, here you go. And they see how this affects their performance. So the control group goes slightly down. So the kid gets a little bit sick of it over time, and that's kind of to be expected. The praise group drops even further. So surprising, because most of the time when we're getting kids to do something, we're getting anybody to do something, we're saying well done and hoping to get a positive response. But what's most interesting is the reward group. The reward group goes down to 53%. In other words, if you continually give a kid a toy or a reward for doing something that you want them to do, actually they become immune to it and it can go the other way. Okay? So you start destroying their intrinsic need to help by giving them a reward. They start becoming reliant on it. Now, just for fun, I'm going to show you a kid that was helpful at the beginning of the day, same kid we saw, and they had been put in the reward group, and this is what they look like.
Der. Na sowas.
This kid now works in the post office. This is exactly, by the way, what my kid looked like. It was so disappointing. Nothing. So we've destroyed this child by rewarding them, okay? And the reason this is interesting and the reason I start with this research is one of the things I want to unpick today is why we do what we do. And this research, and at this stage, thousands of supporting pieces of research show us that praise and reward, which is the typical way that we motivate people, are actually not as effective as we might think. Now, at this stage, often people say, well, these are toddlers, I'm not a toddler, does it work for adults? The answer is yes. But let me tell you a quick story to demonstrate that. This is a story from Abu Dhabi. So in the early 2000s, there was a huge obesity problem in Abu Dhabi. And what they decided to do was put in place a scheme called Your Weight in Gold. And in this scheme, you would be paid for every kilo of weight that you lost with a gram of gold. Okay, sounds absolutely crazy. This is a true story. And what they did is when you applied for this scheme, you had to fill out a little questionnaire and ask why you were doing it. And they broadly put them into two different groups. There were the people that said, I'm doing this for the gold, give me the gold. And then there were the other people that said, I'm doing this for me because I want to become healthy, etc., etc. And yes, by the way, I also want the gold. And they looked at their performance in weight loss over time. 25% of people lost weight overall. The lower TOMO, I'll explain that in a minute, but the lower TOMO group is just for the gold, lost weight, but then as soon as you take the reward away, they start putting the weight back on because they've just been doing it for the gold. The people that were doing it for themselves lost weight and then kept it off. And all that to say is that this big insight is a very powerful one that I'll talk about today. Our traditional way of motivating people and motivating ourselves are praise and reward. We use it in school, we use it with our kids, we use it in our organisations, is not the best way of getting the highest levels of performance out of people. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't pay people well and feel well compensated, but if you can get at the heart of why somebody's doing something, then you'll have a much better chance of getting them to be excited about their work and performing to the highest levels. So I'm going to unpick this by answering three questions today. One is, what is performance? The second is, what drives performance? And the final thing is, what is culture? Or put differently, how can you set up your teams and your organisations, home and school, to unlock the best type of motivation? Okay, so hands up here. Is anybody French in